Hello, everyone. So I received a question which was just about setting up this project specifically with regard to having two players on each part. So I'm just going to go through here, set up a project. Yours will be a little different because you have so much freedom. The fact that there are 8 instruments but 4 musicians means there's a large number of variables and there's numerous different ways you could configure this. And you don't even have to stick to 2 instruments per player. You could have one person play 3 and one person play 1, or you could have 2 players that both play the suspended cymbal but at different times. So completely up to you. There's so much room for creativity. I'm just trying to get you started. So let's set up a new project here. So create new. We want the score to be landscape and the parts to be portrait. Okay, there are a few different ways you could do this. We're not talking about pitched percussion. We'll talk about pitched percussion in a later date. Right now we're just doing, non-pitched percussion, I guess you would call it. Now this could be useful. This is just a general percussion clef. It's going to get a bunch of different instruments on there. Or you could be a little bit more specific. Now it all depends on how you want to configure this. Very often, the snare drum player is the leader of the ensemble. Even if there's a conductor, the snare drum is kind of like the concert master, if you were. Or when there isn't a conductor, then definitely the snare drum player is, not always, but usually the leader. For that reason, I'm going to put the snare in first, and that would actually be under drums. I'm going to put the snare in first, and I'm actually going to have player 1 only play snare. So I can actually have that one just be snare drum. For the rest of them, though, I am going to switch it up. So I'm just going to... there are so many ways you could do it. One of the problems is getting it to play back right. Now, you could take a lot of time and get it to play back right. But honestly, I wouldn't probably be too worried about that because you have real musicians for this one. So let's say my player 2... Actually, player 4, I'm going to put on the bass drum. Again, this is arbitrary. You could do whatever you want with this. Bass drum, single line. But I'm going to have my bass drum player. I'm trying to decide if I want that person to double in the timpani or not. And I'm thinking that I do not. So let's say bass and tambourine or something. I actually am going to try to just do it this way. Have some general percussion clefs. So I know I'm going to have my lead player playing only the snare drum and the other instruments will be divided up among these 3 other people. You don't have to do it that way. That's just a very standard way, but not a requirement. Key doesn't really matter because we don't have any pitched instruments, but the time does. Let's leave that on 4. Tempo, I don't know. Maybe not quite that fast. Again, I don't actually have a song in mind. I'm just doing this so you can see what it will look like. Okay, so I have 4 different parts here. So let's say I want to start with a snare drum roll for 2 measures. Oh, this is interesting. Even on here, we get a bunch of different things. Suspended cymbal, large gong, all sorts of craziness. So let's say I want to have the first thing be a gong. I'm going to go for medium gong. And right away, it's going to be important that you keep track of what instruments these people are playing. You want to have it indicated at the beginning and you want to have it indicated throughout. So right now, I'm going to do this. And actually, because I want my notes to move around with the piece rather than have measures shift and then I have to try to click and drag the text around. If you do it this way, I'm going to go to expressive text, technique text. Let's go to technique because I want it to be straight, not italicized. Create new, and I'm just going to say gong and assign that. So now it's going to carry with it. And because I'm doing it this way, I can actually just go in at the end and fill in who's playing what. And I want to have, let's say a big, bass drum roll. That's cool. Bass drum left hand, bass drum. Okay? And if you noticed, I mean, you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm actually moving my finger very slightly through here, and there are multiple drums in each note location, so you have to scroll through and find the one you want. And let's have the suspended cymbal roll. Actually, let's just do a crash with, now I want to have a snare drum roll. I think this would be pretty easy to find. It's a snare drum part. Side drum, medium gong, snare roll. Okay? Snare roll. And I want to have tremolo. To make it a roll. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're writing for percussion instruments is some of them are very loud. So even if you want something to be really loud, you may not want to write fortissimo or fortissimo or something crazy like that, because these instruments, again, they can get very loud. So be conservative with your loud dynamics. Oh, I forgot to label these. Okay, so let's go through. So this was a bass drum. I'm going to create a new one. Bass drum. And this was a suspended cymbal. Oh, no, sorry, this was a crash cymbal. And now I need to have my dynamics. So I actually want to have... Let's try this. And I don't want to go crazy. I want to hear it, but I don't want to go crazy. The gong, sure, let's have some fun with the gong. And the bass drum, again, just forte. Not going crazy here. So now I'm going to, see, this was on snare roll. Let's see if I can find snare roll on here. Side drum roll. Snare roll, there we go. Back it up, tie it. And I will have to put another tremolo on here because I want it to keep going. It's interesting that it still says snare roll. That's not supposed to happen. That's supposed to go away. Let's see if I put another instrument somewhere else if it does. Interesting. Maybe if I put it there. Nope. Okay, well, that's, again, not supposed to happen. Now I'm using the sure, snare drum. That's fine because we wrote the roll in anyway. There we go. Not sure why that was happening. Now on this top one, I don't have to write what the instrument is because the whole part is just for snare drum. So let's see if we get some playback here. I guess the answer is no. With the program that I'm using, Movavi, sometimes it kind of messes with playback, and it's something that I could go and fix, and I will if any of you would really like to see it. But generally, I think you can see what I'm doing here. So let's just quickly go through here. So I already said that I'm starting with the with those ones, and then I want to, after this gong, let's say this person is going to the tambourine. So let's see if I can find a tambourine on here. I'm sure it exists. Another option is to just click on the lowest note you can find and then use the up and down arrows to cycle through and find what you're looking for. If you can't find it, just put it on anything and still put in the right description. Again, it won't play back the way you want it to, but that's okay in this case because percussion's kind of a different animal. Okay, so this isn't working, so I'm just gonna put it anywhere here, and I'm gonna, beeline. I expect to hear a tambourine, but it's gonna sound like a large gong. That should be interesting. So I'm just gonna throw a bunch of these in here, and then I want to change those to X's because tambourines see X's. So that would be, I think, this little wrench. Yep. Double click the measure and then click and drag to get all of them. Then double click any of them and cycle through and find the note head I want and an I want an X. And now let's throw in some accents. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Okay, and then throw this here and change the accents up. Could click and drag, move them, but I think it's faster just do this. I definitely want a pronounced 3/4. Let's see, that's a group of 3, it's a group of 2. Why don't we say that's a group of 2 and that's a group of 3. And then because I have this accented 3/4, maybe over here, I'll throw in, I'll go to the tenor drums. Well, I need to write in tambourine here, otherwise they would play that on a gong. That's not going to sound right. Expressive text, sorry, technique text, create. Tambourine. Assign now. One of the things I mentioned is that you need to give your musicians time to move. I think they'd be okay. They have a whole note here, pick it up quickly. And again, this is where your room layout comes into play because you need to make sure that the room is laid out in a way where your third percussion player or third player can hit the gong and then immediately pick up the tambourine, or maybe even already be holding it. Okay, so back to what I was saying. This 3/4 here, I want to bring the tenors in here and do like dato, dato, emphasize that. Now with tenor drums, you have to do different pitches, and it doesn't matter where they are as long as they're different. So I'm trying to get that second space note, and it's not letting me, but that's okay. So there's one, and there is, actually, is there a higher one? Okay, I guess it's going to be the B line. So if you are writing for an ensemble that has 2 tenor drums and you write tenor drums, it's going to be obvious that this is the higher one and that one's the lower one. You don't have to be that specific with them. You can if you want to. You'll never be marked down, or being marked down is just for this class. What's really important is your careers after this, but no one will ever think it's a problem to be extra specific. Tenor drums, I could in parentheses write toms, but I'm not going to. So these are toms, bapo, bapo. And I will match the rhythm of this one down here. And let's say that this is still on the bass drum. Because it's still on the bass drum, I don't have to put in a new instrument. I just have to put the rhythm here. Don't want the roll, just a bass drum. So cycling up and down, there it is. Another thing that makes this more confusing, and some of you may remember this from the finale stuff we did in music tech, but there are some instruments in the percussion clef that you can only access going up or down. So if you want the bass drum, for example, I couldn't get it going the direction I was, so I had to go past it and then come back the other way. Okay, let's just throw another accent on here. Anyway, what I was about to say, and I may have already said it, so please excuse me if I did, but you need to throw in a new dynamic marking every time you switch instruments, even if it's the same. In this case, it will not be, though. I really want this to be pretty quiet, so I'm going to do maybe like mezzo piano. I'll go piano. Okay, and then on this part, I also want this to be quiet. Now, a bass drum is only so quiet, so this is relative, but that's fine. This one can be a little louder. That's fine. Let's go mezzo piano. Okay, tambourine, tenor drums. And now, what if the snare drum were to copy the rhythm of the tambourine? Because why not? So I'm only going to have the snare hit when the tambourine does an accent. So looking for just a snare. Now these are always in the same spot once you kind of get a feel for the layout of it. You'll get faster at finding them. And here what I can do is just 2 quarter notes because it's on the downbeat of 3, well, it's on, the strong beat of 3 and 4. And if there's not a tremolo written in, consider for a moment the difference in sound between writing a 16th note for a snare drum player and writing a whole note. There's an attack, and it decays when it naturally decays. You can be specific and write in something like a staccato marking, but it's not going to sound any different. So that's actually okay. Rim shot. We didn't talk about a rim shot. A rim shot is when you hit the snare drum in a way so that the drumstick hits the rim and the head. It's really loud. It's basically the loudest sound you can get on a snare drum. I mean, of course, it all depends on the force, but generally when you want that really loud sound, you write a rim shot. And for this one, let's go mezzo forte. Okay, well, here we go. So I've already used snare, crash cymbal, tenor drums, tambourine, gong, bass drum. So the ones I don't have yet, I don't have the suspended cymbal or the timpani. So maybe we could do some hocketing here, and I could throw the timpani down here with the bass drum. Now, boom, boom, boppo, boppo. If I were to do something like that, it would actually work out okay if the bass drum was right next to the timpani, because you could just use the same mallet for both, and it really wouldn't be any different than playing a drum set, having multiple drums around you. So let's do that. Let's throw in some hocketing. So same thing with the timpani. Because I'm playing specific pitches, I can change this to bass clef. And I want this to be placed after the bar line. I just think it looks better. Otherwise, it would be here. This is just a little bit cleaner. And another thing I could do, I'll have to revisit and look up how to change it. But I know you can actually change the size of that clef as well. No, I don't want to do that. Just so it's not tiny like that. I don't think this is how you do it, but let's see. Nope. Well, it's fine small. If you want it bigger, let me know and I'll look it up. Or you could probably look it up on Google or YouTube faster than I would reply to your email. But either way's fine. So I wanted it to... We said that the notes were C and G. And actually, this is going to create some problems because I can't get to that C. Or this one. So let's just say this. It doesn't have to actually be C and G, but it does have to be 1 and 5. So 1 and 5 in any key. I'm going to go D, A, D, A. And I'm going to transfer over... Oh, no, not that. I'm going to transfer the same rhythm. Again, I'm going for hocketing here. Now, the difference is those are... I mean, they have a pitch, but these are tuned to specific notes. So it'll sound a little different, but maybe that'll be cool. And why not keep this going and throw it up in the snare drum next? Now, the snare drum cannot play different pitches, so I'm just going to have to rely on the accents to make it sound like it. So I just threw in 4 quick notes, and now I'm going to slide through and try to find the one that just says snare drum. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, that is not very user-friendly, there must be a better way. Well, there should be. I haven't figured it out yet, but there might be. And let's throw that on there too. And let's say, why not? Let's just finish out this hocketing thing we're doing with this player. So they're already playing gong and tambourine. I'm trying to think of which other one they could do. I think all the actual drums are accounted for. They could be on the cymbals, or they could be on the tambourine, or they could be wherever. Actually, let's do a big hocketing thing. Let's bring everyone together, and let's say this person is going to... Actually, the bass drum player is already here. So I'm just going to drag this over change that dynamic marking to forte. No, that's too loud. Mezzo forte. Remember, always be conservative with your dynamics, especially on the really big instruments. So, so I'm going to copy this part, bring that there, and let's say I want to have that get louder. So I will throw in a crescendo. And if you want to get to a specific volume, you can be extra specific. So we already started at mezzo forte, and that was fine because it's there. But let's say I want to go all the way up to forte by the end, by this note. Put that there and make sure that the crescendo actually fills in, leads into it and is evenly placed. That looks good. Oh, but that was timpani. So now I need to... Some of you probably caught that. Didn't say anything. Well, obviously you didn't say anything. I'm talking to myself right now. But we're going to put this in timpani. And you don't have to specify the pitches because they're there in bass clef. But because we've gone back to bass drum, we could actually leave it in bass clef. You see percussion stuff written in bass clef a lot. But just to get used to the percussion clef, let's officially switch it back. And we have to write bass drum again, but now my bass drum title is still there. Now these will not stay on all of your Finale projects, but it will stay there for the duration of this project. And let's say the tambourine player had a hit here, and I will finish off that measure and change that to an X. Again, it's this wrench thing, the special tool palette. Click in the measure, double click the note, or click and drag for the notes, and then go hunt for the note head you want. So da 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 da. Let's give an accent on that just to, again, stay consistent. And now let's go to the suspended cymbal. And let's say it comes in here. This is a little tight. This, oh, what's going on? Wow. All right. I'm not sure what's happening with that. Let's just get rid of the whole measure. If it'll let me. And it won't. Okay, let's try this. There we go. And let's just do this. It's just as easy. Now let's try this one more time. Now I want suspended cymbal here. Again, the playback's already ruined because these instruments aren't right, but just because, I'll see if there's a cymbal roll. Nope. Okay, so let's just put it wherever. Sure, why not? And I want to do a swell, and then I want to do a hit on beat 3. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to actually just do a normal note. And if you see a note by itself, that does mean you play the suspended cymbal like a standard drum set crash cymbal. So I'm going to go in here, play the suspended cymbal, which I haven't created yet. The way that I can tell that I want, or the way the musicians can tell I want them to swell here and play here is the crescendo and the tremolo. So I'm going to need to go in and use some dynamic markings because it's a new instrument, and I'll clean up that mess in just a moment. I'm going to put a big accent here, forte here, pianissimo here. Always want to start really quiet for a suspended cymbal. And again, it's this style of notation that tells the players what you want. And when they see this combination of markings, it will be very clear to them that you want to roll, a swell. A roll is one sound, a swell is a crescendo. So adding in the tremolo on every part of it. So in this case, there are 2 tied notes, so I have to put the tremolo on both. Oh. Now, one thing you could do, I'm just kind of making something up as I go, and this is fine for you to do as well. Or you could take any of the other songs you've done this semester so far and create a drum part for it. Like take Let It Go or The Veggie Lament, and put some drums to it. And one thing we could do in class is actually just listen to those drums with that music you've already worked on. I spread that out so we could see everything a little bit better. If it bothers you that it's taking up an entire page, you can change the size of it, and that's actually really big. If we were to look at that printed, it would probably look like it was written for someone with impaired vision. So that's fine to do it like that. This is a little sloppy, even though it's, I think, obvious. Let's still throw a mezzo forte on here just so we know what the swell would be. In fact, because we're putting it anyway, let's make it a little bit more dramatic. So that dot connected here, that doesn't matter. Making these a little closer to the notes than you normally would, just so that it's extra clear which part it's referring to. And I don't need that tambourine there because it's still tambourine. And I'm going to extend this crescendo all the way to that one so that they can see that it's one, da-da-da-da-da-da-bam. Okay, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 measures, and you need 32. So that's one example of what you could do. I did mention that you have to include section numbers for this one with measures. So that's under this one, the MF and mezzo forte, and then you'll go to rehearsal marks. This would be like A section, this would be the first section. We're not going to use either of those. This is 100% of the time, in this course at least, and in most of what you do, this is what you'll want to choose. So wherever I put it, it's going to throw a 6 up there. And if I move it to a different measure, it changes the number, which is really nifty. And you have to have at least 3 sections. So 3 labeled sections, and you never start with the first one. So measure 6, and then let's say I do something different. I measure whatever this is, 21, and then I have yet another section here. And it's not just about dropping them in randomly. You have to actually place them where something different happens in the music. It can be a tempo change. In Alan's piece today, he had those tempo changes, which were wonderful. Those would be excellent opportunities to throw in these measure numbers. Now, these do a few things. Number 1, it allows the conductor or the band leader to bring everyone together really quickly. I can say, everyone at measure 21, please, and everyone has 21 marked. No one has to count. Also, if someone wasn't playing for a long time, which is fine, silence is sometimes the best option in music, it would break it in half. So like if I had one player not playing throughout any of this, this would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would just be a 6-bar rest, but we'd still see 21 and 27. So it's really helpful. For every assignment moving forward and every piece of music you ever write, please put in these section numbers. I'm just seeing if there's anything else I want to adjust before I conclude this video. That tremolo is touching the note. I could move it. It's really not a problem because that just makes it extra clear what I'm talking about. But because it looks sloppy, I'm just going to move it up the tiniest little bit. And it's still very clear what's going on. Now this means it's not, well, this actually indicates a swell too. But I don't have to write the crescendo out. This is all snare, tenor drums. I don't need to include that because I did already. I also don't need to include that. But I do want to change the dynamic marking on that because I want this moment to be bigger. So let's go up to forte. Sure. Now I think this would be cool as it is with the hocketing. So this thing here, bump, 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 bop, 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 they all go together. And because I want to match that symbol, I'm actually even going to go one step further and drag this to here. That'll be cool. Anyway, I like the hocketing, but just because I think it might sound cool, and it's still hocketing, it's a little different, but it still works, I'm just going to drag this throughout, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, and get rid of that, and the dynamics. Now, when you're composing and arranging for instruments that don't have pitches, you have to do something else to keep the music interesting. And dynamic contrast is the easiest way to do that. Also, sonic contrast. Don't use, I mean, you can use the same drum for the whole time, but feel free to switch it up. The one exception, or not the one exception, there's no hard rules on this, but it is common practice that if anyone is sticking on one instrument, it's probably going to be the snare drum player. I do want to change this. So obviously this isn't done. It's not 32 measures, but let's say I had finished it. The last thing I'm going to do is change these names. I'm going to go to the staff tool because I just want either player or first percussionist, something like that. So edit full staff name. First percussionist. I did a right click or a control click on that. Second percussionist has the one there because there are actually multiple parts. What I would do is that's something I would actually change in post, so to speak, meaning that once the piece was finished, I would export it as a PDF and then I would annotate that and get rid of it then, or maybe just rewrite things in. And then you would want to do the abbreviated names as well, but I'll just do this one so you can see the idea. And then it's common practice that underneath, or to the side, or wherever it fits, you just write what they need to play for this part. So here I'm just going to write snare because that's the only instrument. This one, if this was the whole song, has crash cymbals, misspelled. And actually I'm going to change that other one to crash cymbals as well, the green one in the text. And, oh, sorry, that's not all. And tenor drums. Tenor drums 2, because there are 2 drums for this piece. For this one, we have gong, tambourine, and sim. Suspended cymbal. And lastly, down here I have bass drum, or GC will also be an abbreviation for bass drum. I think we learned together, I think it was Gran Casa, something like that, but GC or BD. Timpani, so timp, and then in parentheses, D and A. I could even specify octaves if I wanted to, but it doesn't really matter for here. I guess we could say, what would that be? D3 and A4, I think. Oh, sorry, A2. Then that all looks good, and then like I said, I want to change this one, so I'm just going to double click on it. It's going to open, edit, changed symbols, and because it's that same one, if I drop it in somewhere else, or if I had already dropped it in, it would have changed it there too. Okay, well, this is what 5 measures of this project looks like. Don't be intimidated by it. It can be very complicated if you want it to be. It can also be quite simple. That's going to be completely up to you, artistically and musically, how complex or simple you want it to be. And simple doesn't mean bad, and complex doesn't mean good. It's all up to you. Maybe that looks cleaner off on the side. No, that doesn't work. Okay, how it was. All right, well, good luck. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Bye.